Hey everyone, this is Cameron from Renegade Animation on renegadepopculture.com. If you like what we do, please give us a like, a follow, and a rating on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to us. We are everywhere. Make sure to share out our episodes, and if you can, consider supporting our Patreon. That way, we can keep doing what we love, and that's talking about the circle of life in the world of animation. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
And this episode is a big one. The Lion King turned 30, technically last month, but over the weekend, Disney put this movie back out in theaters with honestly very little fanfare. But still, I wanted to take an episode to just kind of reflect on the legacy of what was at the time the highest grossing animated feature of all time and the second highest movie of all time, only behind Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. So before we really get to the movie proper, something that was not necessarily homework for this episode, but homework really for myself, I wanted to go back and watch the documentary Waking Sleeping Beauty, because for those who don't know, that documentary covers a lot of Disney Animation's history from 1984 to 1994, where the company was pretty much at their lowest to the peak of the Disney Renaissance.
I mean, it was more than just the peak. It's been talked about before, but from 1984 to 1994 was some of the most important years for the company, because it's been mentioned before, but we'll say it here for anyone new to Disney history. After Walt Disney died, they weren't in a great spot. They were making movies, and they did what they did with the legendary Nine Old Men taking up mostly like directing and being in charge of the projects. But by 1984, they knew they needed to change. They needed to bring in new talent to make the next batch of Disney classics, because by this point, they weren't making their A tier stuff. They were making, like, I guess what Disney fans would say their B and C tier stuff. This was right after the release of stuff like The Fox and the Hound, and then with the disastrous release of The Black Cauldron, which, yes, it's a movie that bombed, but that's not why it was the lowest point. It was the lowest point because it got beat out by the Care Bears movie that was released around the same time. And there is no worse moment in time for Disney than that one moment. The gold standard for family entertainment in the world of live action and animated filmmaking was getting beat out by the most commercial of schlock. And when Michael Eisner brought on Jeffrey Katzenberg, it was like, okay, we really need to make some changes and make actual good movies. We need to, the documentary would reference Awake Sleeping Beauty. And lo and behold, that is what happened. It was a slow burn until 1989, because at that point we then had The Great Mouse Detective, Oliver and Company, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, then in 1989 with The Little Mermaid, and then what was it, 1990 that The Rescuers Down Under came out, and then with 91 or so was when they released probably my favorite Disney movie, Beauty and the Beast, that won them their own respective Oscars, but was important because it was the first animated movie to be nominated for Best Picture, which is extremely historically important for
Oh yeah.
not just the Oscars, but just filmmaking in general. People may downplay it now because of what damage the live action remakes have done, which they really haven't done that much damage, y'all. Just stop listening to YouTubers who are reactive and overly dramatic about this kind of stuff. But it was a serious moment in time for Disney because now everyone was thinking, okay, so what's next? Then obviously we got Aladdin, which was a huge critical and financial success, mostly on the back of Robin Williams as Genie. And then after that, we had The Lion King, the highest grossing animated feature at that time. Is it still of all time, or is it like still in the top 5 or 10, but not the highest grossing animated feature of all time?
By now, there's got to be at least like 3 or 4 others that are above it.
But still, it was a huge hit, which is funny because of the behind the scenes stuff where Katzenberg and Eisner were more interested in the movie after The Lion King, which was Pocahontas, because they were gunning for that Oscar, baby. And they thought Pocahontas would do that for them. And The Lion King was treated as a secondary project. Like it was the B film compared to Pocahontas being the A tier film. Or so that's what the environment from the studio was like, which is weird to think about because there were apparent stories of people saying that if you acted badly during the production of Pocahontas, you were told to go over and work on The Lion King. And it's odd that that's happened twice now with Katzenberg, because apparently there were stories like that during the production of Shrek. If you acted up, you got to go work on Shrek, which, obviously Shrek became the most important movie in the world of animation in 2001.
Sometimes behind the scenes of like the biggest animated films are often the most fascinating because so many things you think maybe going right could also be going like completely terrible.
I mean, that's just what happens. That is more often the case than like what happens behind the scenes. Quite a lot of times, we all know about what happened with The Emperor's New Groove.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, the most important movies that are ever made and are actually important in film history have the most train wreck, roller coaster, flying off the rails productions. Not that that's what they wanted. Nobody wants a bad production pipeline. But sometimes it just, you have the right people and the right number of events happening to craft your experience.
Exactly.
Outside of the behind the scenes stuff that happened with this movie, let's actually talk about the movie itself. Man, I haven't seen this movie in a few years. It was so good. I know some people write it off as quote unquote overrated and such because of just how big and popular it became. But man, sometimes a really acclaimed movie earns and deserves that acclaim.
I'll admit that's kind of how I felt for a few years, mostly as like a teenager into my 20s. But my history with this movie is, to be honest, I can't really think of a time in my life where this movie wasn't just this massive entity. Now, this came out in the summer of '94. I don't think I was old enough to have seen it in theaters, but like the second it came out on home video, or at least by the time we moved into our current home, this thing was on constant rotation to the point where the clamshell VHS cover was basically destroyed. The VHS tape has obviously worn out through just constant use. Even if I wanted to, like, there isn't a TV in the house that could play the movie now because we don't have an input for a VHS player. But this is a movie that I've seen no less than 100 times over the last like 30 years of its existence. It's a movie that I basically have memorized like all the different scenes.
I was young enough to remember seeing this in a theater, which I was so mad that I couldn't get to a screening of this in a theater. This would have been amazing to see on the big screen again. And it was the first time when, from what I recall, that moment when you're introduced to Scar, I still remember got everyone to jump out of their seat a little when he puts his paw down on that little mouse like animal. Everyone was like, whoa, because this is one of those Disney movies that is grand. It is epic in scale. Just how everything is shot. And of course, obviously, the Circle of Life opening sequence, which just makes you feel immersed in a new life, is brought into the amazing Circle of Life and how important that is for the Pride Lands and for just the world itself. You felt like you were a part of that circle.
This is one of those movies where like the music is just as much a character as well the characters. This movie specifically had two soundtracks. It had obviously the original score and the songs written by Elton John, Tim Rice, and compositions by Hans Zimmer and Lee Boehm. But then they went ahead and made a second soundtrack, Rhythms of the Pride Land. Yeah, that opening Circle of Life sequence is just kind of the perfect grand statement of this is the story we're going to tell. These are the images you're about to see. Witness it in all of its glory.
And man, they just made some amazing imagery to go along with that. The sun rising, the animals migrating to Pride Rock, and just a sweeping orchestra of the music when we finally see Simba born. Like, it brings you back to that first moment you watched this movie as like a kid, where this is like the biggest moment in your life, or just what it feels like. It's really impressive. It's Disney putting down their best foot forward, and it's a great first impression. This movie was directed by Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff. Roger Allers has worked on a multitude of things. I think one of his more lesser known contributions to animation was working on the Animal Olympics special with a lot of Disney animators that would go on to work on stuff like The Emperor's New Groove, among many other big animated projects. We might have to do an episode on the Animal Olympics because when you see all the names in the world of animation show up in there, it's like the Avengers of animation talent.
Oh, if I can find that, I definitely want to just watch that for the historical value of it.
Roger Allers is also known for directing stuff like the first open season, the Little Match Girl short that was originally cut from Fantasia 2000, if I recall. And then one of my favorite movies from 2015, Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, which we might have to talk about that one also because a lot of his fingerprints from The Lion King are here in The Prophet. Highly underrated movie. I have the poster up at my apartment next to my bed. One of my favorite movies from the 2010s. And also an amazing experience on the big screen. Now, the other director, Rob Minkoff, has worked on a multitude of other stuff from the Roger Rabbit shorts, the first two Stuart Littles. He's worked on The Haunted Mansion. He's worked on Mr. Peabody and Sherman from 2014. But The Lion King is his most well-known work, alongside working on some live action stuff like The Forbidden Kingdom. And I don't blame any of him on this, but Paws of Fury, The Legend of Hank. But that, again, that whole movie went through a trial by fire of production hell. So,
Yeah. And we already talked about that.
again, sometimes even having the best talent on board does not save you from production troubles. So, The Lion King. A young lion prince is cast out of his pride by his cruel uncle who claimed he killed his father. While the uncle rules with an iron paw, the prince grows up beyond the savannah, living by a philosophy. No worries for the rest of your days. But when his past comes to haunt him, the young prince must decide his fate. Will he remain an outcast or face his demons and become what he needs to be? This movie is so interesting since it's essentially what the documentary has described and what everyone describes this movie as. Disney's take on a Shakespearean experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because it very much is take out the lions and replace it with a medieval times setting. You have yourself, oh, I forgot which one they said this was inspired by from Shakespeare. Was it Hamlet?
It's like mostly Hamlet, a little bit of King Lear, and some other influences. There's a bit of Moses in there. It's like mostly Hamlet.
So it's just interesting because when you think about it, it's like Game of Thrones, just in terms of medieval political period piece dramas, but with animals. That's the power of both animation and creative storytelling. Because if someone has never seen this movie before, and you just said it's Hamlet but with talking lions, people would give you a weird look. I mean, like, even if it was like from Disney, it was just like, huh, okay, I'm curious. And you see it right from the get-go with Mufasa, the leader of the Pride, voiced by the great James Earl Jones. Of course, squabbling with his brother, Scar, voiced by the always amazing Jeremy Irons. Great casting, by the way. I love these two as Mufasa and his, evil version with Scar.
This casting was just perfect.
And just the voices they bring. This is something I've talked about before with watching Disney movies. Something that I think has been kind of lost with casting these days in animated films is not just a whole celebrity voice cast. It's more the fact that they choose the biggest names, but not the best sounding voices for the characters. For Mufasa, you want him to be this big, prominent king of the Pride Lands. And getting James Earl Jones is perfect for that. For Scar, you need this Shakespearean villain who is both slightly hammy and melodramatic, but also extremely sinister to the core. And getting Jeremy Irons was so good. I've talked with you about this, like when I've watched like the Justice League cartoons from time to time. It's a certain kind of voice and sound that everyone has that we just don't quite get these days because everyone sounds maybe a little too modern, if that makes sense, like too current. There's no like lived in experience with the voice. There's no distinction with their performances. It's something that reminds me of just how Disney used to just, they would hire like stage actors and character actors for the most part, with maybe the occasional celebrity. But it was never like that celebrity casting until, of course, the genie from Aladdin being voiced by Robin Williams.
It didn't become stunt casting until after Robin Williams.
And even then, people misunderstood the whole context and idea of why you hire a big name for the project. It's not just to have a big name, it's because it was the right fit for the right character.
Exactly.
Then, like, as we go through the story and we see the seeds of betrayal planted within the story, we, of course, see Simba as a young child, voiced by Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Boy, that's a name from the 90s.
You're going to probably say that a few more times as we run down this voice cast.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because then this is one of those cases where Jonathan Taylor Thomas is the acting voice for Simba, but then the singing voice is Jason Weaver. And read up about Jason Weaver. That kid was set for life because of the contract deal that he made to do the singing voice for Simba. Instead of taking a big paycheck up front, he was basically getting money as the Lion King became super successful. So he was getting royalties left and right for years. Like, the dude's set for life. He did the singing voice for Simba, and he's set for life. That is just really cool. I just think that's really fun to see because most people would be like, just give me the money now. I'm sorry, I just love that story for Jason Weaver. Just so cool. And Simba, like, he's excited about being future king one day, but is, a child. He's not taking the potential threats of what lies beyond the sun in the Pride Lands. Because, of course, there's that whole sequence of Mufasa saying everything the light touches is ours, except for the Shadowlands, where you do not go there, you do not touch it, you just don't go near it, avoid it like the plague. And then, obviously, we get the introduction to other characters like Zazu, who is Mufasa's, like, messenger bird, voiced by Rowan Atkinson, which I forgot that Rowan Atkinson had an entirely different voice compared to what he does with Mr. Bean.
I guess growing up, I just thought Rowan Atkinson just was Mr. Bean, but that was before I learned about Blackadder and, of course, his honestly underrated out of the voice cast. Atkinson is probably the most underrated in this movie.
No, he does a great job. I love a lot of his lines and just the right amount of sass he brings to the character, especially when he's having to be the jester for Scar later on. Just, of course, the slightly meta joke of how annoying the "It's a Small World After All" song is when he starts singing it, and Scar's like, no, anything but that. Which, just to make a small little detour before we continue on with the story, I forgot how, like, at the time, I guess, quote unquote, hip and modern the dialogue sounds for this movie. Like, it feels very Shakespearean with how they talk, but then you run into the characters like the three hyenas voiced by Whoopi Goldberg, Cheech Marin, and Jim Cummings. And then you kind of notice all the little, they're not pop culture references, like, to the extent like the genie would do, but they had more modern dialogue than what I recall.
It's puns. I was watching the Cinema Wins, everything great about The Lion King after I came back from the theater, and it didn't hit me until I got home that, like, oh wow, pretty much like at least like 50% of this dialogue, of their dialogue especially, is all puns.
That's amazing. It's like 50% puns, 20% sarcasm, 30% genuine, heartfelt stuff. Which, I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It's just that 30% stuff is amazing stuff, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Especially when they run into the hyenas, and of course Simba not seeing murder in front of him. Zazu's just like, Ixnay on the stupid A. And then, of course, Bonsai, who's voiced by Cheech Marin, was just like, who you saying, Upide? Stuff like that. It's a great balance of comedic dialogue along with the puns and more serious dialogue work. I was never really that distracted with how these characters talked to one another. And it's just amazing because I know a lot of times when people complain about more modern dialogue in animated movies, it's more like, okay, this is what they think sounds cool and hip. Here, it feels so natural that like they would talk about these puns and make slight references to Disney's history or just speak more of it in a 90s term. Not full on lingo from the 90s, but just it's more whip smart, I'd say.
The term would be sharp, very sharp as attack writing.
Exactly. I think that's a perfect way to describe it. And I love these three hyenas. They're very good comedic villain foils to Scar and everyone else. I mean, having Whoopi Goldberg, Cheech Marin, and Jim Cummings. And Jim Cummings' character, Ed, has no speaking role. He's just maniacal laughter, which reminds me of his voice work with stuff like the Tasmanian Devil more than anything else. And like they work, they're funny, the dialogue is great, and they never got grating because sometimes Disney side characters could get grating. I know a lot of people love Treasure Planet, and as much as I love Martin Short, his character in that movie was so annoying. And so was moments with David Hyde Pierce. I know, sometimes I'm just thinking we should just go through all the Disney movies at one point.
Maybe one day we will do that, but
we'll do like a wheel or something like that. Throughout like this first third though, we get all this amazing music also. We get the Circle of Life performance, we get the fantastic environmental music, then we also get the Just Can't Wait to Be King performance. And while that might be my least favorite of the songs, it's still killer.
It's my least favorite just from a musical perspective, but again, listening to the lyrics and back to just the sharp tongue of the like performers, Zazu's verse in that is one that stands out the most.
Then after all this, after Mufasa saves Simba and Nala, and then you get the whole great sequence of Mufasa with his son just saying like, hey, the kings of the past look down on you to help guide your way. And then throughout like the whole background of the movie, and I forgot about this part, we from time to time cut back to Rafiki, this mandrill voiced by the late Robert Guillaume, who is also just one of the best characters and one of the best performances of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like having spiritual predictions with Simba of like what may come, and then the big return at the end when he finds out that Simba is still alive. But we're getting to that point where we're getting to pretty much the middle of the movie where it's pretty much, I think, back to back the most iconic moments of the movie. Honestly, like with these two moments along with the Hakuna Matata, that this whole middle half of this 90-minute movie is probably some of the most iconic imagery, music, directing, animation. I mean, this whole movie is filled with iconic moments, but it's really these three moments I want to talk about. Because we find out that Scar pretty much sent the hyenas to try to kill Simba. And hyenas are, of course, are like, it's not like he was alone. What did you want us to do? Kill Mufasa? And Scar, that's when it kicks in for Scar to be like, actually, yes. And we get one of the best villain songs of Disney history, Be Prepared.
I would even say this is probably just one of the best villain songs ever.
Yeah, no, it's like top five material. Just the amazing iconography and visuals that go along with it, with Jeremy Irons doing a generally like good job at singing a majority of the music, and of course the imagery of the hyenas marching like super soldiers from World War II. That imagery was not subtle, and it wasn't meant to be subtle.
No.
Scar was going to cause death and destruction in his wake as a ruler, if anyone stood in his way. And fun fact, at least the tiniest tail end of the song, Jim Cummings takes over as the singing voice for Jeremy Irons. I don't know what the story is exactly what happened, that like Jeremy Irons couldn't hit this part or something, so they brought in Jim Cummings.
From what I understand, Jeremy Irons, while performing this song, blew out his vocals, so they had to get Jim Cummings in to finish up the track. And I think, honestly, no matter the circumstances, I'm glad that Cummings finished the song just because he gets to add a little bit more energy and insanity to the end of this track. And it pairs well with like the dark imagery, the hyenas kind of playing around with like the bones,
the geysers erupting, smoke and fire forming around everything, Scar rising on a pillar up from the earth. It's a great last third of a song. And Jim Cummings is so imposing as Scar's singing voice. It's so good. And then we cut to the moment, the stampede, which is amazing on a whole technical level, because this was when Disney was still slowly implementing CGI into their movies. And for the most part, you wouldn't even notice until maybe Hercules, when, you fight stuff like the Hydra and what have you. But here, just what I assume was probably the hardest moment to animate, where Scar's plan is ignited when the hyenas start a wildebeest stampede. And you just see what is essentially a waterfall of wildebeest riding down through the canyon.
This was my favorite scene to watch this past weekend in theaters on the big screen. This is kind of like another example of just how grand the scale and the scope of this movie is. Seeing that, as you described it, a waterfall of wildebeest just like come charging down the hill into the valley. It's just insane.
It's amazing. It's a technical marvel and one of the most heart-pounding moments in any movie, like not just Disney and animation, but just any movie. Just watching Simba try to avoid one of the things that you really don't want to get stuck in the middle of.
No.
Like this massive herd of wildebeest, scared and frightened by the antics from the hyenas, which I love that little like the fuse of the bomb is lit when they're just waiting in the background behind the wildebeest. And of course, Bonsai is like, oh man, I'm so hungry. I just want to eat one. And Shinzi is just like, no, we're not going to eat one. Bonsai is just like, can I just, can I just get one of the weakly, like the sickly looking ones? Like just a nibble. And it's like, no, we will wait until we need to activate everything. And I just do love Cheech Marin and Whoopi Goldberg's back and forward in this movie. Like I said, I just think they're a great comedy like duo.
They are.
And then of course we get the moment where Mufasa does save Simba, but gets injured and gets sucked into the roaring flood of wildebeests to almost save himself, then seeing Scar loom above him as Mufasa asks for help, only for Scar to dig his claws into his pause and to say, "Long lives the king," and lets Mufasa drop to his death. Which this would have been like traumatic as a kid. I remember being shocked and like hating this moment because it's like, no, they wouldn't do this for a kids movie. No.
This was for us what Bambi's mom was for the generation before us.
Golly. Disney's just like, we're going to murder your parents in ridiculous ways every other generation. Just wait a few years. Wait until Tarzan comes out. We'll have a new one waiting for you. It's just funny to think about sometimes. And of course, by the end of it, Mufasa's dead. Simba thinks he killed him with the gaslighting and manipulation from Scar, which I don't agree with people saying that Scar becomes a less interesting villain as he goes along. He stays pretty consistent throughout this whole movie. He's not, well, like he says at the beginning of the movie when he's talking with Mufasa. Mufasa got all the brawn and strength, while Scar has all the brains. He's not an imposing monster. He's a manipulator.
Exactly. I think it's probably taken me like a few more recent watches to really just understand exactly what he's doing. And yes, he is very much gaslighting Simba into feeling all of the guilt of what happened with the stampede.
Exactly. And then when he says, like, you better go. The tribe will not accept that you killed Mufasa. And then, like, just a minute later when the hyenas show up, he's just like, kill him. It's so sinister. Yes, he's not the most outwardly subtle, like, villain. I mean, you look at his design. He's the bad guy. It's you have to be blind as a bat to not understand that Scar is the villain.
Oh, yeah.
Art direction, y'all. And Simba then finds himself out in the savannah, of course, getting away from the hyenas, and was essentially going to die out there, which, again, really heartbreaking imagery to see baby Simba struggling and then falling limp in the middle of nowhere, which, yeah, you don't want to be like dehydrated and exhausted in the middle of nowhere. That is, of course, until they are saved by a meerkat and a warthog named Timon and Pumbaa, voiced by Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella.
Fun fact about their casting. They were originally auditioning to play the hyenas, Banzai and Shenzi, but I think what happened is because at the time they were in a production of Guys and Dolls, and just seeing them like just next to each other, that's when the casting director said, like, yeah, you guys are Timon and Pumbaa.
Yeah, and fun fact, one of the animators behind Pumbaa is Tony Bancroft, who we talked with before over the film Animal Crackers. He was a Disney animator. He was an animator for Cogsworth. He helped animate Iago. He was a supervising animator for Pumbaa. He was the director, of course, for Mulan with Barry Cook, and then was the supervising animator for Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove.
A lot of great work on his resume.
And more recently, he was the animator behind Daffy Duck for Space Jam: A New Legacy. That's very cool. I like that. Let's talk about Timon and Pumbaa, because from what I can tell, some people are kind of mixed on these two as like the comedic side characters for Simba. Like, you either love their place in the movie where they help teach Simba to forget about the past because it's behind you. You got to keep moving forward. Or you kind of find them a little grating. What's your take on Timon and Pumbaa?
I honestly really like them, but that could just be because I see a lot of Abbott and Costello in their dynamic. And
Mm-hmm.
as I was, growing up obsessed with this movie, the next year, Timon and Pumbaa got their own animated spin-off. So that just kind of helped me endear them even more. But talking just off this movie, they really do a good job, adding levity to what's like a pretty, for a Disney film especially, a pretty grave and mostly serious, but still has its Disney charm movie. Timon and Pumbaa bring a lot of lightness to, especially after Mufasa's death. They came in at like just the right time.
We just got through two sequences where the villain song used Nazi iconography to tell you how bad Scar and the hyenas are, to one of the most traumatic deaths in Disney film history. Like, you're on edge a little. You need something.
Exactly.
It's like how when the first Final Destination movie came out and there was that whole famous bus kill in the movie, that scared the daylights out of test audiences so much that the studio told them to add in 20 seconds of breathing room before they start the movie back up again, just because they knew audiences needed a breather. Like, yes, looking at it now, it's like, oh, it's quaint and whatever. But back then, that was shocking. It makes sense that The Lion King needed to have some joy brought back into the world. And I think what makes Timon and Pumbaa much better side characters than others is the fact that they do add a lot to the story. They're not just the gargoyles from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or like I said, Martin Short's character from Treasure Planet. Then they have just like the slightest inkling of connection, overall thematic elements of the movie. But here, they are what sets Simba up for his next arc. Like, yes, tragedy happened, but now you got to pick yourself back up and keep moving. Like, figuratively and literally, because, Simba was going to die out there if he didn't go with Timon and Pumbaa. And starting eating bugs and such, where we get Hakuna Matata, one of the most iconic and catchy songs from the 90s Disney Renaissance. This is another one where I feel like people are split down the middle, where they either love it or find it grating. I think the reading of it being a lazy song is a little short-sighted. They're telling them, like, don't worry. But it's like they got one half of the puzzle right.
That's kind of how I think of it too. It's not be lazy, it's you're starting a new chapter. What happened in the past doesn't matter. It's just time to move forward.
So it's like, I think that a lot of it, people labeling it as the lazy song, not the Bruno Mars song, but just in general, is a little bit of that like media illiterate nonsense that the internet spews out from time to time. It's an important song. And I think people just kind of rag on it because, again, The Lion King was just freaking everywhere. This was like the Frozen before Frozen happened. So,
exactly.
And of course, as we see then, Simba grows up to be a young lion, now voiced by Matthew Broderick, and just lives his life at ease with Timon and Pumbaa, eating bugs and just enjoying life, not caring about what is happening outside of the world around him. Until he meets an adult Nala, voiced now by Moira Kelly.
I actually didn't know this. So the singing voice for adult Simba is the lead singer of Toto, Joseph Williams, which
Oh, that's fun.
that is really cool casting for a singing role.
It is. And I keep saying this that we get another iconic moment in this movie, but it is an iconic moment where you get the Can You Feel the Love Tonight ballad between Nala and Simba, which I know people like to jokingly be pedantic about this because of the fact that in real life, lions are essentially run by the female members of the species while the men lie about and such. Basically, they're just to help make kids and such. So that means that Nala and Simba in real life would be tangentially related. That's the thing about this kind of movie. Who cares? You're not here for the realism, man.
Exactly.
You just heard a "Don't Worry, Be Happy" song where part of it was about how Pumbaa had bad body odor. The animation on this movie is so amazing. I love the vibrant colors used, just how every little detail is animated. Just puts so much weight into these characters, whether it's more comedic animation, the more dramatic moments. You just feel and see these characters. You're not just seeing 2D animated cartoon characters. You're seeing Nala and Simba bonding with one another.
Seeing these two numbers, Hakuna Matata and Can You Feel the Love Tonight, in theaters, that's probably the most I felt immersed in the world and with these characters.
Right. We get probably my favorite moment of the movie where Simba encounters Rafiki, and Rafiki finally helps give Simba that second missing puzzle piece that Timon and Pumbaa put down on the table. Like, this is like a two-piece puzzle. You got the ones that Timon and Pumbaa put down, and now Rafiki has the other piece, which has the moral of the story of, yes, the past hurts, it sucks, which, by the way, is probably told in one of my favorite ways of Rafiki just basically whacking Simba on the head, just to kind of prove to him that, like, yes, it happened, it sucks, the past, well, as the movie says, the past can hurt, but you can either run from it or learn from it, in which he does. It is such a great moment, on top of Simba finally coming to terms and accepting his coming of age destiny from the spirit of Mufasa, telling him from the clouds, like, again, man, the color grading or whatever it's called of just how they light those clouds and this whole scene, just beautiful work. I wonder if it's like the same guy who did the color work for Aladdin, because that's another Disney movie where the colors popped.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's the same guy, but those are two great examples of really great color work in the 90s Disney animated films.
And listen, we aren't going to do a compare and contrast thing with the 2019 Lion King animated remake, because there's no point to it. And the discourse around that movie got really stupid recently. So it's like, I'm trying to keep that to a minimum. What I will bring up, and what people seem to keep not wanting to talk about, is how the 2019 remake essentially ruins the big moral message of the movie. Because I haven't seen the Lion King 2019 remake in a while. Like, actually, honestly, probably since 2019.
Same.
But the fact that they rushed through the whole heart-to-heart talk with Rafiki and Simba was so blood-curdling to me. Just like, God dang it, this is the entire emotional core of the movie, people. Like, I don't know what happened there. It was like they messed up that part so much. I was more upset about that than the whole Be Prepared remake that they did, which wasn't great, but at least I liked the performances there. But here, I just did not like at all how they treated it, because the past can hurt part is like the best part of the movie. It's the moral backbone of this movie of, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be sad about the past, but you have to keep moving forward. You can't be stuck. Such a good part. And when we see Simba run off to go back to the Pride Land, it's like, you're just like pumping your arms in the air and just being like, yeah, it's so good.
Again, another shout out to Hans Zimmer and Lee Boehm for creating an epic, a triumphant, like, the hero comes home to save the day anthem.
Right. And of course, Nala, Timon, and Pumbaa go back with him to save the Pride Lands, which have been destroyed, like royally screwed over because Scar scared off all of the animals that made the Pride Lands work. The Pride Lands is a symbiotic ecosystem. You need all the animals there. And when Scar basically took over, he ruined that symbiotic ecosystem to where it just looks like garbage. I did almost snap back at Timon, being like, man, so we're going to fight your uncle for this? It's like, yes, Timon, we're going to fight my uncle for this. It'll look nice in a few years. Zip it. I don't need your sass, Nathan Lane. It just reminds you of that Deadpool 2 teaser when he jumps out of the phone booth fully dressed and then Stan Lee's there. It's like, great costume. Zip it, Stan Lee. Like I said, I just love the voice performances. I know, like, not everyone is a fan of Matthew Broderick. I'm not the biggest fan of him. But this is one of his few performances that I actually like from him.
Same.
And, like, he can be funny. It's just like any funny actor. You need to give them the right material to work with. Otherwise, either they have to be talented enough to elevate something, or, like, they need writers who know what they're doing. You're not always going to have a moment where, you know, James Woods, like, looks at how Hades was written and it's supposed to be this big imposing monster, and he essentially turns him into a used car salesman. That's just one of those incidences where the talent was good enough to make the character work. Here, Matthew Broderick is good, but it also helps that he has a strong script to work off of.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he doesn't have the best, like, dramatic reads of the movie, but the dialogue is good enough to where I'm like, I'm not super distracted by that.
That's kind of how I feel. He doesn't have the most interesting, like, presence, both on screen and as a voice actor, but he gets the job done.
Exactly. I found him to be more interesting than Donald Glover from the 2019 remake. And listen, I love that cast in the 2019 remake, but some of those performances were rough. It wasn't the best, like, acting from any other movie except for the two guys I got to play Timon and Pumbaa, which was, I think, Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen.
Yep.
I'm just saying, like, it gets good. And now this is another little moment where I noticed the more snappy dialogue comes in, where Simba tells Timon and Pumbaa to distract the hyenas because of the luau thing. On one hand, it's like, it's a really funny moment because of just how Timon is like, you just want me to dress up in drag and do the hula? And then it cuts right to him doing that. And that little jingle about, like, hey, are you hungry? You want to eat this pig? Like, it's great. It's super funny. It totally distracts you from thinking, how do these animals from Africa know what a luau is? Did I just hear someone from a safari visit say that or something? Like I said, you don't care.
Exactly.
Like, a lesser movie would make that eye-gougingly distracting.
It comes in and leaves at just the right amount of time to get the laugh, and then it's over. They don't draw attention to it.
Exactly, which I think what hurt The Hunchback of Notre Dame, because the comedic characters of that movie stayed just a little too long. But there was also just some writing elements that I thought could have been handled better, but we'll get to that another time. And of course, this is the big fight, the big blowout combat revenge moment for Simba to take down Scar. And Scar tries to gaslight Simba, well, and the others into thinking, like, yeah, Simba was the one who killed Mufasa, y'all. Like, I might be a terrible leader, but I'm not the one who killed Mufasa. And this is probably the moment where I think the writing doesn't fully work. And I don't know what happened in production to make it feel like this part was a little clunky. It's him trying to manipulate the pride to turn against Simba, and Simba's just like, no, that's not what happened. I guess it's just like this is the one moment where I did let my immersion drop, where I was like, after Scar destroyed everything, are y'all really going to trust Scar's word that Simba killed Mufasa?
It's a little bit of a hiccup in terms of the lesson that Simba came home with to then have to be re-gaslit by Scar, and then for example, Sarabi to start to question it. I think what should have happened is Scar tries to say, if it wasn't for you, Mufasa would still be alive. And then just what he says just falls on deaf ears until he says, like, and here's my little secret. I killed your father. Or something like that. It's
I was about to do the Darth Vader no thing. Oh God, James Earl Jones, you have traversed yourself through multiple franchises to be in our hearts. It's the one moment where I feel like it's a little clunky there, and I don't know if it's just like, wait a minute, let's add the moral, the message before he gets there, instead of having the re-gaslighting happen, then the moral happens. It's a minor nitpick because then we get to the whole fight sequence where the gray skies are then lit up by the fire and the hyenas and lions are fighting. Like everyone's fighting to get rid of the hyenas and to stop Scar. And of course, we get like the great moments like Rafiki being a martial arts master. The great comedic punchline of they call me Mr. Pig. I love the build up to that because yes, it is a pop culture reference to Sidney Poitier's "They Call Me Mr. Tibbs" reference, but instead here it's just like, you talking to me? It's like, yeah, what of it, pig? It's like, oh, you're calling me a pig? They're like, oh no, he called him a pig. Again, whatever modern pop culture references have been like ruined by modern audiences works here because of the execution and the performances of Ernie Sabella just being a delightful character with Pumbaa and such. I loved that whole sequence where the three main hyenas essentially get their butt kicked by the warthog.
a very satisfying moment.
Exactly. And then, of course, we get yet another gruesome animated thing that would have given this whole movie an entirely different rating if they showed the graphic violence that was about to happen. Because after a big scuffle with Simba and Scar, they get into that same predicament of Simba could save Scar and forgive him of his actions, but then Scar just has to go one step too far. Simba basically drops him beyond the rocks, and Scar finds himself at the wrong end of the hyena's hungry palate. And Scar is just eaten alive. Like, if they didn't cut away and show the shadows lit up by the fire, this would have been an extremely gory moment.
Oh yeah.
It's funny what you can get away with in animated movies if you are just creative enough to avoid an extra rating from the association that helps rate movies.
I just think it works better when scenes like this are better left to the imagination of the audience.
Exactly. It's just funny how that works because sometimes it can feel a little cheap that they cut away from the gore or whatever, but here it's super effective. You know what's going to happen when the hyenas are like, you know what? You called us stupid. We're going to wreck you now. I mean, it's just interesting. It's like how if you watch Godzilla X Kong, A New Empire, the recent one, oh, Kong ripped that animal in half, but its blood is and guts are yellowish green. What a way to get past the censorship board by being like, no, it's not blood and guts, it's animal blood and guts. And here it's like, yeah, the main villain gets eaten and torn apart, but you don't see it, so it's not as graphic.
And then we get the Disney magic rain, which cures everything.
God, that magic rain. I keep forgetting how much of a trope that is within Disney movies. It's like one of the unsung Disney tropes. And then, of course, we get the big moment of Simba going on top of Pride Rock with the swooning score of, like, brought to us by Hans Zimmer. Just that great moment. It's so good. It's just, you feel it. You feel it in your guts. You feel it in your bone. And watch as everything returns to normal. And we do like a cultural reset of the beginning of the movie because we've literally come full circle in the circle of life.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, it's just so good, man. That ending. Like, at first, I was going in with this thinking, yeah, Lion King is maybe not in my top 5 or top 10. And now that I think about it more, I think it is in my top 10. I have to check my Letterboxd list because I think it is in my top 10 Disney movies. At least maybe top 5.
I think this last time that I've seen this movie has pretty much locked it into my top 5. It's moved around a lot over the years just because I started like my development being obsessed with this movie. Then, like a song you've heard too many times on the radio, I kind of got sick of it, wanted some distance away from it. And then now that I'm older, I know a little bit more about like how this industry works. Coming back to it has kind of made me fall in love with it again.
I think that is what happened with me. It's me coming back and ignoring all of the internet yelling and such, saying like, man, this is overrated and whatever from people who don't know how movies work. And then being like, you know what? This movie's great. I don't care if you think it's quote unquote lesser of Disney's 90s era or just Disney in general. It earns that place as one of the best Disney movies ever. And yeah, it's in my top 10. Like, my top 10 are like Fantasia, Sleeping Beauty, Lilo and Stitch, The Lion King, Aladdin, The Great Mouse Detective, The Emperor's New Groove, Tangled, Encanto, and then Beauty and the Beast. Disney is in like a very weird spot right now. I think the corporate side of everything, of the production of their movies, has taken over too much and has hampered their films creatively because Disney has a lot of amazing, talented people working there.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had amazing, talented people throughout their lives, like as a studio, out over their 100 years. But when you watch The Lion King compared to the films that they've been releasing now, there's just something missing from some of their recent work. And I think their 90s films are a good example of that. It's missing that sauce that they're not letting the chefs cook with in their studio. They're shaving down the movies to be such a precise 4-quadrant experience that they are missing the heart, soul, and creativity that the hardworking animators bleed into these movies.
It's not like they can't ever return to the quality of The Lion King. It's just they need to figure out how to get there. And, one of the reasons I wanted to watch Waking Sleeping Beauty again is to, A, take a second to appreciate that when Disney was at their lowest, they found the way to pick themselves back up again. So they have the capability of reaching these heights. It's all cyclical, is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, we're just waiting for them to have that realization and for Bob Iger to stop doing what he's doing and to let the creativity thrive again there. But like I said, I think the search for money and profit has hampered their recent films. Like, I love Encanto and I enjoyed films like Raya and the Last Dragon and thought Strange World was fine and then really didn't like Wish or just found Wish to be a disappointment. We're at that low point now. And that films like Encanto were the exception to the rule of what they're doing right now. They just need to bring forth and train, or, like I said, just let the chefs, the animators, cook.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting watching Waking Sleeping Beauty because the Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg of that time period were very different to who they were after a certain period in time. Eisner was the one who greenlit the direct-to-video sequels, which really hurt Disney as a brand. Then, of course, Jeffrey Katzenberg continues to be the egotistical dirtbag that people know him as, with the massive failure of Quibi that he still doesn't quite accept was his fault. And then, of course, his recent antics of saying, yeah, AI is going to take over animation jobs, get over it. And it's just like, what happened to that time period? Oh, I mean, I know what it is. It was success and ego that basically made Eisner and Katzenberg into who they are now. But it was interesting to see all of that production behind the scenes stuff from their movies recontextualize what made them classic, and how a lot of the times it was because some of them were in a hot mess of a production pipeline. A few smart decisions at the right place at the right time is what sent them back into the stratosphere. And I think that's just what needs to happen here, because Disney is definitely in a tough spot. Like, not only are they not putting out as many great movies as they used to, but of course they're being overly reliant on brands. They're overly reliant on remakes. I'm still hoping for the best for Moana 2, but I'm a little worried about that one.
Same.
Because Moana was like maybe the last time for a while that Disney was at the top of their game. But even at that point, you can tell that the foundation was crumbling. So I hope one day soon, sooner rather than later, we see a much healthier Disney rise above the current spot they are in. Because if they can make stuff like The Lion King, they can make that kind of movie again. So I hope they do, because man, The Lion King was just amazing to rewatch today.
I don't know how long it's going to be playing in theaters, but if it's playing near you and you have an opportunity to go see it. Because especially if you're taking your children or nieces and nephews who have never seen the movie before, now is like the perfect time to share with them a moment that was formative to you, and paying that forward it's what keeps the magic alive at Disney.
Exactly. Again, we've talked about this. Disney is no longer the biggest fish in the pond, and the other fish are outmaneuvering Disney. And if Disney wants to survive in that pond before a bigger fish eats them, they need to adapt. They need to grow. They need to be like a phoenix, burn out, and then be reborn from its ashes. And that's all I have to say about this. It's just a really great movie to talk about from head to toe, and to acknowledge the amazing feats of talented artists and writers and directors that put this all together.
I'm glad we got to talk about this movie because it did play such an important role in my development, both as a fan of animation, movies, music, and just the lessons this movie taught. It's a movie I couldn't really live without. That's just how special this one is.
Yeah, yeah. Out of the movies from the 90s, I would argue that at the very least, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and Lion King are three of the most important movies of that decade.
I would agree with that.
As much as I like talking about new stuff and that we keep moving forward, because I don't know how our audience would react to us talking about older movies. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying The Lion King is older because it's 30 years old. It's like, what do you mean it wasn't released 10 years ago? It's just interesting because I would love to talk about older movies. There's a lot of great animation, not just from the bigger companies, but from all around the world. It's just sometimes the audience is not there. But hopefully, people will like hearing us talk about this. So if you'd like to hear us talk about it, just leave us a comment and such. I'd love to hear from y'all. Like, that'll be it for this episode. I think next time we'll be talking about My Adventures with Superman Season 2.
Which I am very excited to dive into. But until next time, Cameron, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram at Cam's Eye View. I have a website called camseyeview.biz where I review animated films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/camseyeview. That's where you can find me.
And you guys can find me on various social media sites at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/CoachK42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and that place at Ren Pop Culture. You can also find us on YouTube, on Podchaser. Consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/Renegade Pop Culture. Listen to all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. You can escape, so do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.